Every time I hear this song, I can't help but think about our good friend Robert Smith, who passed away 2 years before this recording.
When I pray, will you always hear me call? When I'm feeling down, you have to stand and talk. You forgive me every time I fall. Many times.
Robert left this world for heaven December 14th, 2017. He was born in Harlem, New York in 1941. Having been orphaned at a young age, he was adopted by an elderly couple who loved him like he was their own. As Robert matured into his teen years, he discovered a passion for music, specifically soul and rhythm and blues. His smooth singing voice was beginning to be sought after, which led him to hundreds of singing venues. He became a backup singer at the Apollo Theater in New York City. He even became the road manager for the popular 70s band called The Main Ingredient. This band was made popular by their hit titled Everybody Plays the Fool. By Robert's own admission, this life on the road led him to actually play the fool by experimenting with drugs and alcohol, eventually eating away at his morality and conscience. By the time Robert was in his 40s, his fame was overshadowed by the burden of his own addictions and strained relationships with his children. Robert was the smooth soul singer on the stage, but he was a troubled soul when the lights faded and the crowds went home. He knew in his heart how God loved him, and he even sang gospel songs on occasion, but the temptations that appealed to his flesh were winning the day. Finally, his singing career came crashing down, and he found himself as a resident of the rescue mission in our town. That's where I met him. You see, I taught at the rescue mission every week for 15 years, and one day in walked Robert Smith, looking for answers, looking for freedom, having lost everything due to bad choices. Robert was at the bottom. Through pain-filled eyes, he introduced himself to me, and we became very close friends. He called me pastor, and I always considered that a great privilege. Over the next few years, I witnessed the miracle of God's grace transform Robert's aching heart into a heart full of God's love. His relationship with Jesus was restored. His relationship with his family was restored, and he ended up singing on the praise team of our church. Within time, another pastor friend of mine who was born and raised near the same area as Robert also became a pastor to him. My pastor friend named Peter says of Robert, "When I met Robert at the rescue mission, God put him immediately into my heart. As time passed by, he shared with me his struggles in this life. He also shared with me a very important factor, that he had not contacted his children for so many years. My heart went out to him, and I asked him if it was at all possible for me to call his adult children. He gave me permission, and they were more than thrilled to be in touch with their father once again. When Robert gave his life to Jesus, it turned things around for him. What joy was in his heart every time he sang for the glory of God. He was thrilled and humbled to the fact that God would choose him to sing and lead the people into the very throne room of God for worship. There was never a complaint on his lips while he served at the church. People were overwhelmed with love for Robert. He showed the true character of what a Christian should be, and we were more than blessed by his humble spirit. His smile was contagious, and so was his spirit. His heart and love for God was much encouragement to God's people. Sure, he was not perfect. None of us are. But he would be the first to tell you how Jesus had changed his life. He loved God and loved his people, and God safely took him home." And that's from my friend, Pastor Peter. Melissa and I were privileged to be with Robert in his final days. We invited Robert to give his testimony on this CD, but he passed away 2 years prior. Robert faced death with the certainty of God's salvation and never once complained of his cancer that he struggled with for several years before he passed. His faith in God was anchored like a battleship, and his humble appreciation of what God had done in his life radiated through him up into his dying day. Jesus and Robert had become great friends, and Jesus wants to be your friend too.